midst of a relentless citywide storm, a black chef counted the last of her supplies, knowing she might lose everything this month. At her lowest moment, a group of homeless people appeared, drenched and shivering, seeking warmth and food. Without hesitation, she opened her doors and served her final meals. By morning, volunteers from across the city were arriving, inspired to join her mission. Before we dive in, what time are you watching this? Where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me. Rain hammered against the windows of the Ember Spoon, a small, warmly lit restaurant tucked between two shuttered shops on a nearly empty city street. The storm had turned roads into rivers, and the wind whipped loose signs and umbrellas into the gray chaos outside. Inside, the scent of simmering tomato sauce and fresh bread battled the cold, damp air creeping under the door. Chef Aaliyah Thompson stood behind the counter, wiping her hands on a worn towel as she surveyed the nearly empty dining room. Shelves of canned goods and half-full boxes of ingredients lined the back wall. Her eyes lingered on them with a mix of worry and determination. This month had been brutal, supplies running low, bills piling up, and a storm that would have shut down any business not already armored with wealth or luck. She knew the numbers. She knew the cost. If tonight went wrong, she might lose everything she'd worked for. Yet even in that tense, desperate silence, there was something in Aaliyah that refused to turn away from those in need. She had been a chef long enough to know hunger, enough to know that sometimes the world only changes when someone decides to act. The first knock came as a soft, uncertain tap against the glass door. Aaliyah froze for a moment, staring at the shadowed figure outside. Another knock followed, heavier this time, and then a low voice called out, almost drowned by the storm, "Please, anyone, warm food?" She hesitated only a second. Sliding the bolt, she opened the door to reveal a small group of people, men and women, their clothes soaked, faces pale from the cold, eyes wide with the vulnerability only extreme weather can bring. One young man clutched a thin blanket around his shoulders, shivering despite the soaked layers beneath. A woman held a toddler close to her chest, trying to shield the child from the driving rain. Their expressions carried the silent weight of exhaustion, hunger, and desperation. Aaliyah's heart tightened. "Come in, quickly," she said, stepping aside and ushering them into the warmth of her restaurant. The wind followed them inside, tugging at their clothes and scattering raindrops across the tiled floor. She grabbed towels and blankets from the back and handed them out, guiding the group toward the tables. The storm outside grew louder, a ferocious percussion against the glass panes. Inside, Aaliyah moved to the kitchen, the clatter of pans and the hiss of the stove cutting through the sound of rain. She worked with practiced efficiency, scooping steaming bowls of rice, ladling rich stews, and stacking sandwiches on trays. Her hands moved almost automatically, yet every gesture carried intention, a promise that no one here would leave hungry. The homeless patrons watched quietly, their eyes softening as the warmth and aroma filled the room. For many, it had been hours, maybe days since a hot meal, and the smell alone made them sigh with relief. As she set the trays on the table, Aaliyah took a moment to glance around. The storm raged on, unforgiving and relentless. Yet inside the Ember Spoon, there was a fragile sanctuary, a bubble of light and hope in a gray, wet city. A young man named Marcus, who had arrived first, hesitated before taking a seat. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for a bowl. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the storm. "You're welcome," Aaliyah replied softly. "Eat. Get warm." She moved to another table, kneeling slightly to hand a sandwich to a woman whose child had begun to whimper. "Here, sweetheart, eat this while it's warm," she said, smoothing the child's hair back gently. The little one's eyes, wide and curious, reflected the flickering light of the restaurant like tiny, perfect stars. Outside, the storm showed no mercy. Branches whipped against the windows and water pooled along the cracked sidewalk. But inside, a ripple of something different began to take shape, a quiet, unspoken energy that drew the patrons together. Conversation started in murmurs, hesitant and cautious. Stories of lost jobs, cold nights on park benches, and searching for a place to belong began to float through the room. Aaliyah listened, offering nods, gentle smiles, and words that reminded them they weren't invisible. Minutes turned into hours. The storm persisted, but more and more people appeared at the door. Neighbors who had seen her actions, inspired passers-by, even volunteers who had heard about her small act of courage. Each new arrival brought food, blankets, and helping hands. Aaliyah's small restaurant, designed to seat 20 at most, began to swell with life, warmth, and hope. She paused behind the counter, wiping sweat and rain from her brow. Her heart raced, not from exhaustion, but from disbelief at the ripple her actions had caused. She had intended to feed a handful of people, maybe 10 at most, and now nearly 50 souls filled her dining room, each one receiving warmth, comfort, and a reminder that humanity could still shine through the storm. Through it all, Aaliyah never stopped moving, pouring coffee, ladling soup, handing towels, listening. And for every tired, hungry face she met, she saw a reflection of herself. The same resilience, the same hunger for dignity, the same need to matter in a world that often overlooked people like them. By the time the storm's fury began to wane, a quiet calm had settled over the Ember Spoon. The rain still fell in a steady drizzle, but the panic and desperation had lifted. Patrons lingered, sharing stories, offering thanks, exchanging smiles that felt like sunlight breaking through heavy clouds. Aaliyah stepped back and allowed herself a rare, quiet breath. She hadn't saved the city, hadn't ended the storm, but she had created a moment, a haven, a chance for people to feel safe, seen, and fed. And somehow, that mattered. As the storm's intensity gradually softened into a persistent drizzle, the diner's small fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the room. Patrons huddled in clusters, some on borrowed chairs, others leaning against tables, the aroma of food mingling with the wet, earthy scent from outside. Aaliyah moved between them, her hands now raw from hours of dishwashing, ladling, and stirring. Yet her spirit remained unbroken. She paused at the end of a table where a man in his late 40s nibbled a sandwich quietly. His name was Elijah, a factory worker laid off 2 months prior. His once proud uniform shirt now hung loose on his shoulders, stained with rain, the name tag faded from countless washings. "You made this?" he asked, lifting his eyes to hers, awe and gratitude mixed in the look. "Yes," Aaliyah said, keeping her tone light, though the truth was heavy. "Just trying to make sure nobody leaves here hungry tonight." He nodded, swallowing. "You know, people don't do this. Not out in the storm, not with nothing left. But you did it anyway." Aaliyah's chest tightened. That was the hardest part, knowing she might lose her restaurant this month, knowing the bills were mounting, and yet feeling compelled to help. She had scraped together the last of her supplies, betting on hope instead of logic. Hope, it seemed, had a strange way of multiplying when offered to others. Marcus, the young man she had first helped, now moved between tables, helping distribute blankets and offering drinks to those whose hands were shaking from the cold. His earlier hesitation had transformed into a quiet leadership, and Aaliyah noticed the shift. People looked to him as a figure of calm in the storm's aftermath, much as they looked to her in the kitchen. Meanwhile, word of the small haven had begun to spread beyond the immediate street. Through social media posts and quick phone calls, more volunteers arrived, carrying boxes of food, jackets, and umbrellas. Some brought hot coffee, others brought portable heaters, and a few even carried lanterns to light the dim corners of the room. One by one, strangers became helpers, and the line between the hungry and those offering aid blurred into a shared purpose. Aaliyah paused to take a breath, glancing around at the sea of faces. For a moment, she allowed herself to wonder, how did it come to this? How had a simple love for cooking and an insistence on kindness drawn so many into her small corner of the city? She leaned against the counter, listening as conversations bloomed around her. One older woman told her story of losing her home to a fire, clutching a photo of her grandchildren. A young man, barely 20, recounted sleeping in a subway station the previous week, his voice breaking as he described the cold and fear. And yet, even amidst sorrow and struggle, laughter began to bubble up. A joke about soggy shoes, a playful tease about a spilled drink. These small moments of joy felt like miracles to those who had forgotten how to smile. By 9:30 p.m., the diner had become more than a place to eat. It was a refuge, a symbol of resilience and humanity. Volunteers had taken charge of organizing lines, serving drinks, and making sure every patron felt seen. Aaliyah, exhausted but steady, finally allowed herself to sit for a brief moment, her back against the counter, watching the rhythm of the room. Then the storm delivered its next challenge. A loud crash echoed from the front, followed by panicked shouts. One of the older volunteers, a woman named Clara, pointed toward the street. A fallen tree branch had smashed into a parked van, blocking the narrow alleyway that served as the diner's only entrance and exit. Panic threatened to ripple through the crowd as the reality hit. More people might be stranded, more supplies might be needed, and the storm wasn't done yet. Aaliyah didn't hesitate. She grabbed her raincoat and ran outside, pushing against the wind and rain. Volunteers followed her, others helping to guide patrons safely away from the damaged vehicle. Marcus grabbed a nearby crowbar and began moving debris with the help of two others. Aaliyah's heart pounded, not just from the exertion, but from the mounting pressure. The risk of losing everything this month was real, yet here she was, risking more than just her supplies, risking herself to protect these people. Finally, the van was moved enough to clear a path, and everyone returned inside. Aaliyah's clothes were soaked, her hair plastered to her forehead, but she smiled despite it. The storm had tested her, and so had the city, but she had passed the first trials of the night. Back inside, she noticed one young girl, maybe 10 years old, curled under a blanket with a cup of cocoa. Her eyes were wide, taking in the chaos and warmth, absorbing the generosity she had never known before. Aaliyah knelt beside her. "You're safe now," she said softly, brushing damp strands of hair from the girl's face. "No one's going to leave here hungry or cold." The girl nodded, a small, shy smile forming. "Thank you, ma'am," she whispered. Aaliyah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, quickly brushing them away. It was moments like this that reminded her why she had chosen this path, why she refused to turn away. Even when the numbers didn't add up, even when bankruptcy loomed, even when the storm seemed insurmountable, she knew that kindness, in its purest form, could create miracles. As the night wore on, volunteers began to share their own motivations, revealing the invisible threads connecting them to Aaliyah. A retired nurse named Rosa had brought extra blankets because she remembered nights on the street herself decades ago. A young college student, Jamal, had decided to join after seeing a social media post about a chef who wouldn't turn people away. Each story layered on top of another, creating a tapestry of compassion, showing Aaliyah that her small act had become a beacon, a spark igniting larger acts of generosity across the city. By midnight, the storm had lessened to a persistent drizzle, and the diner's small tables were stacked with leftovers, blankets were folded neatly, and exhausted but inspired volunteers began to plan for the next day. Aaliyah moved quietly behind the counter, her hands raw, her body aching, but her spirit soaring. She could see it, how one person's decision to act, even in the face of personal loss, could ripple outward in ways she had never imagined. Her phone buzzed, and she checked it, expecting messages from suppliers or worrying bank notifications. Instead, it was a series of texts from volunteers she didn't even know yet. Messages of gratitude, offers of assistance, even a few pledges to donate to help keep her restaurant running. Aaliyah sank into a chair behind the counter, breathing in the warmth, the scent of food, and the quiet hum of people sharing stories. She had counted her last supplies earlier, feared a total loss this month, and yet somehow here she was, witnessing a community come together in the most unexpected and inspiring way. The storm outside had battered the city, but inside the ember spoon, something stronger had taken root. Hope, compassion, and the undeniable proof that even in the darkest nights, light can break through. one selfless act at a time. By 2 a.m., the drizzle had slowed to a gentle mist, but the city streets remained slick and treacherous. Inside the Ember Spoon, volunteers had begun to pack away excess supplies, folding blankets and stacking containers of food. Aaliyah moved slowly between them, exhausted, her body aching, yet a quiet determination kept her upright. She paused by the counter, glancing at the ledger tucked under a heavy weight of papers, an unspoken reminder of the financial storm looming over her. This month's rent, utilities, and supplier payments loomed like a shadow over her heart. She was barely scraping by, and yet tonight she had opened her doors to a city in crisis. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to see. Outside stood a figure drenched from the storm, clutching a small cardboard box. His name was Andre, a local businessman who had been following updates about the night's effort on social media. "I know this is late," he said, voice low but urgent, "but I couldn't stand by after seeing what you did tonight." Aaliyah blinked, unsure how to respond. Thanks, but I'm fine. Really, it's just one night." "No," Andre said firmly, "it's not just one night. You've kept this place running for years, helping people when the world ignored them. It's time someone helped you." He handed her the box. Inside were checks and cash totaling several $1,000s, enough to cover her rent, utilities, and supplier debts for the month. Aaliyah felt her breath catch. She had been counting her last dollars earlier, convinced that total loss was inevitable. And now here was a lifeline, offered by someone she barely knew, moved by the story of her night-long generosity. Before she could respond, more figures emerged from the mist. People she had helped in the past, families, former patrons, even the young girl she had comforted earlier. They carried small gifts, supplies, and warm words, forming an impromptu line of support that stretched along the diner's front. The energy was electrifying. One by one, they delivered words of encouragement, gifts of food, and even cash donations. "This place saved me once," one man said. "It's time to return the favor." Another added, "You fed more than just stomachs tonight. You fed hope." Aaliyah felt tears prick her eyes. She had feared she was losing everything this month, but now she saw something far more powerful. A community ready to rise together, inspired by her courage and compassion. The Ember Spoon wasn't just a restaurant. It was a sanctuary, a symbol of resilience, and a testament to the impact one person could have when they refused to turn away. Marcus approached, standing beside her quietly. "You did it, Aaliyah. You kept everyone safe, warm, and fed. You reminded us all what humanity looks like in action." "I couldn't have done it alone," she admitted, voice shaking. "None of us could. It's bigger than me." Outside, the storm had passed entirely, leaving the streets glistening under the city lights. The mist rose in thin wisps, curling like smoke over the asphalt. Inside, laughter and chatter filled the diner. People shared stories, hugged strangers, and expressed gratitude in a way that felt almost sacred. By 4 a.m., the diner was quiet again. Most volunteers had left, heading home, leaving a few devoted souls to help Aaliyah tidy up. She stood behind the counter, surveying the room. Every table told a story of struggle, resilience, and connection. Every chair held the imprint of someone who had been seen, heard, and fed. Aaliyah sank into a chair, closing her eyes for a moment. She had feared total loss this month, but now she understood something fundamental. Generosity, even when it seemed impossible, had the power to create miracles. The night had tested her in every way imaginable, yet it had also revealed the extraordinary strength of community, courage, and compassion. And just as the first rays of dawn peeked over the city skyline, casting a golden glow through the diner windows, Aaliyah smiled, knowing that this night would be remembered not for the storm, but for the light that had shone in it, her light, and the light of everyone who had chosen to step forward and help. The Ember Spoon was no longer just a restaurant. It was a beacon, a testament to what could happen when people chose hope over despair, action over fear, and love over indifference. Weeks passed since that unforgettable night, and the impact of Aaliyah's actions rippled throughout the city. Local news outlets ran stories about the Ember Spoon, highlighting how a single black chef had turned a stormy night into a beacon of hope for hundreds. Donations kept coming, not just money, but supplies, volunteers, and even partnerships with other local businesses eager to join the cause. Aaliyah found herself mentoring new volunteers, teaching them not just how to serve meals, but how to listen, comfort, and treat every person with dignity. The diner became a hub for community programs, job training workshops, free health clinics, and after-school programs for kids who needed guidance and stability. The city's residents began calling her the Chef of Hope. Parents brought their children not only for meals, but to learn lessons in empathy and courage. Former patrons who had once received her help returned as volunteers, eager to pay the kindness forward. Aaliyah realized that the storm had not just tested her, it had awakened a network of compassion that she could never have imagined. She no longer feared financial loss. She now understood that impact couldn't be measured in dollars alone. The Ember Spoon had grown into something bigger, a movement, a legacy, and a lasting reminder that one person's courage could ignite a city's heart. And while the kitchen remained busy and the streets occasionally stormed, Aaliyah finally knew one thing for certain. Even in the darkest moments, light finds a way to shine, and sometimes it starts with a single act of kindness.